What if the raised bed you were about to leave empty could still grow one more round of food before summer ends? Maybe it is sitting there right now in the heat, half bare, with a few tired stems, dry mulch, old roots under the surface, and one empty corner that keeps bothering you every time you walk past it. Maybe you already pulled out spring lettuce, early peas, radishes, onions, garlic, or potatoes. Maybe the first round of summer crops is slowing down, and the bed looks like it has done its job for the year. But before you let that space sit empty, look at it one more time. A raised bed that looks finished is not always finished. Sometimes it is just waiting for the right crop, a little fresh compost, a deep drink of water, and a better plant. Late summer is not the same in every garden. If you live where the first frost comes early, you have to be more careful. You may need fast crops, direct sown roots, quick greens, or healthy transplants instead of slow seeds. If you live in a warmer zone, your raised bed may still have enough heat left for beans, okra, peppers, eggplant, cucumbers, squash, herbs, and even more cherry tomatoes. The key is not to pretend every garden has the same calendar. The key is to look at your own weather, your own first expected frost date, and the number of warm weeks you still have left. And here is the most important thing before we start. These 20 crops are not a challenge to squeeze 20 different plants into one raised bed. They are a menu. Your job is to choose the crops that match your space, your climate, and the kind of harvest you want. A productive raised bed can look full, but it should never be planted like a crowded drawer. If every plant is fighting for light, water, air, and root space, the bed may look green for a while, but it will not feed you the way it could. So today we are going to walk through 20 food crops that can make sense in raised beds before summer ends. Some are quick fillers, some love heat, some grow best when the nights begin to cool. Some hide their harvest under the soil. Some give you leaves, some give you fruit, and some give you flavor every time you cook. But before you plant any of them, you need to wake the bed back up. Start with the soil, not the seed packet. A lot of gardeners make the mistake of treating a late summer raised bed like fresh spring soil. But by this point in the season, that bed has already worked hard. The first crop may have pulled nutrients from it. The sun may have baked the surface. Roots may still be tangled underneath. The mulch may have thinned out. Water may be running off the top instead of soaking deep. If you plant directly into tired soil, even the right crop can struggle. Begin by clearing what no longer belongs there. Pull out old stems, dead plants, diseased leaves, and roots that are taking up space. You do not have to dig the entire bed upside down. In fact, if the soil structure is still good, gentle work is better. Loosen the top few inches just enough to remove old debris and open the surface. If you find thick old roots from a finished crop, pull them out. If you find earthworms, crumbly soil, and good moisture underneath, that is a good sign. You are not starting over from nothing. You are refreshing a living bed. Then add compost. Not a mountain, not a miracle layer, just a practical top-up. Spread compost over the planting area and work it lightly into the surface where new roots will begin. Compost helps the soil hold moisture, improves texture, and gives the next planting a better start. If your bed has been growing heavy feeders like tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, or peppers, this step matters even more. The next crop should not have to live on leftovers. After compost, water deeply before you plant. This is one of the quiet steps that makes a big difference. In late summer, the top of the bed may look damp after a quick sprinkle, while the lower root zone stays dry. Seeds can sprout and then fail. Transplants can wilt even though you watered them. So give the bed a slow, deep soak. Let the water move down into the soil. If the surface dries fast, water again before planting day. A raised bed drains well, and that is one reason gardeners love it. But in hot weather, that also means it can dry faster than in-ground soil. Once the soil is moist, think about mulch. Mulch is not just for making the bed look neat. It helps protect the soil from harsh sun, reduces moisture loss, softens heavy rain, and keeps the surface from crusting over. Around transplants, mulch can help the roots settle in. Around direct sown seeds, be more careful. Tiny seeds need light soil contact and steady moisture, so do not bury them under thick mulch. You can mulch between rows or add mulch after seedlings are up and visible. Now check your timing. Do not skip this. Look up your first expected frost date. Then look at the seed packet or plant tag. Count backward. If a crop needs more time than your season has left, that does not automatically mean it is impossible, but it means you need to adjust. Choose a faster variety, use a transplant, harvest it young, or choose another crop from this list that fits your garden better. That one habit can save you from a lot of disappointment. Late summer gardening is not about forcing the season to do what you want. It is about working with the time that is actually left. Once the bed is refreshed, watered, and planned, the first crop to consider is bush beans. Bush beans are one of the best ways to make an empty raised bed feel productive again. They do not need a huge trellis like pole beans. They grow in a compact shape, and they can fill a blank section of soil with green leaves and flowers fairly quickly when the weather is still warm. If you have a gap where an early crop came out, bush beans can be a smart choice, especially if your frost date is not too close. In a raised bed, bush beans are useful because they give structure without taking over the entire space. You can plant them in a block instead of one long row, which makes good use of bed width. But do not crowd them so tightly that air cannot move between the plants. Late summer can bring humidity, heat, and disease pressure, so airflow matters. A little space between plants is not wasted space. It is part of the harvest plan. Bush beans also fit well into succession planting. If you planted beans earlier and they are slowing down, a small second sowing may give you another round before the weather changes, depending on your climate. If your season is short, choose faster maturing varieties and keep your expectations realistic. You may be harvesting tender young beans, not trying to grow a giant crop. The key with bush beans is steady moisture when they flower and set pods. If the soil swings from dry to wet to dry again, the plants may drop flowers or slow down. Mulch around them once they are established, and harvest often. Beans left too long on the plant can signal the plant to slow production. A small handful every few days is still a real harvest, especially from a bed that might otherwise be empty. Next, think about cucumbers. Cucumbers can be one of the most rewarding crops in a raised bed, but only if you control their direction. A cucumber vine allowed to sprawl across a small bed can cover everything nearby. It can shade young greens, tangle with beans, and make it hard to water at the soil level. But when you give cucumbers a trellis, even a simple one, they become a vertical crop. That is where raised beds start to feel much bigger than they are. If you still have warm weather left, cucumbers can be a strong late summer choice in many gardens. In cooler regions, direct sowing late may be risky, so a healthy transplant or a fast variety may make more sense. In warmer regions, cucumbers can keep growing as long as heat, water, and disease pressure are managed. Place cucumbers where they will not shade the entire bed. In many gardens, that means the north side of the bed, or the back side, depending on your sun direction, so the vine climbs without casting too much shade over smaller crops. Give the roots good compost, steady moisture, and mulch. Cucumbers are thirsty plants. A dry spell can lead to bitter fruit, misshapen fruit, or a plant that simply stops pushing new growth. Harvest cucumbers young and often. Do not wait for them to become huge. A cucumber left too long on the vine can slow the plant down, and oversized fruit often loses quality. The best raised bed cucumber harvest is not one giant cucumber hiding under the leaves. It is a steady rhythm of smaller, crisp cucumbers picked before the plant gets tired. Now let's talk about zucchini, because zucchini is both exciting and dangerous in a raised bed. Zucchini can give you a strong payoff. Big leaves, yellow flowers, fast growth, and fruit that seems to appear almost overnight when the plant is happy. It makes a raised bed look alive, but zucchini is not a small plant. If you put too many zucchini plants into one bed, they will dominate the space. They can shade carrots, crowd lettuce, block air, and make it hard to see what is happening underneath. So if you choose zucchini before summer ends, treat it like a main crop, not a filler. Give it a corner or a dedicated section. One healthy plant may be enough for a small raised bed. If your season is short, choose a compact or fast variety. and consider using a transplant instead of starting from seed too late. If your season is long and hot, zucchini may still have time to give you a useful harvest. Zucchini likes rich soil, consistent water, and room for airflow. Water at the base when possible. Keep the leaves dry if you can, especially in humid weather, because powdery mildew can become a problem late in the season. Mulch helps keep soil moisture steady and keeps the fruit cleaner. The biggest mistake with zucchini is planting it because you have one empty square foot. Zucchini does not want 1 square foot, it wants room. But if you give it that room, it can become one of the crops that makes a late summer raised bed feel abundant again. Yellow squash works in a similar way, but it deserves its own place in the plan. Yellow squash gives beautiful color to a raised bed. The bright fruit stands out against the green leaves, and the flowers attract attention right away. Like zucchini, yellow squash can be productive, but it can also become too large for a crowded bed. The question is not, can I fit this plant? The question is, can this plant grow well without stealing the bed from everything else? If you plant yellow squash late in summer, use the same timing rule. Check your frost date, choose a fast variety. In short season areas, a transplant is safer than seed. In warm areas, direct sowing may still work if the soil is warm and the plant has enough time. Harvest yellow squash while it is still tender. Waiting for huge fruit may feel impressive, but smaller squash usually has better texture, and frequent picking encourages the plant to keep producing. Look under the leaves often. Squash can hide, and by the time you notice it, it may already be larger than you wanted. In a raised bed layout, squash belongs where you can reach it easily. Do not bury it behind a wall of taller plants. You need access to check for fruit, remove damaged leaves, and watch for pests. A plant you cannot reach becomes a problem before it becomes a harvest. If you garden in a hot region, okra may be one of the smartest choices on this list. Okra is not bothered by heat the way lettuce or cilantro can be. In fact, okra often starts to shine when many other crops are struggling. For gardeners in the south, warm coastal areas, or long season zones, okra can keep a raised bed productive when late summer heat is still intense. It stands upright, which helps save horizontal space, and its flowers are beautiful before the pods form. But okra still needs a plan. It can grow tall, so place it where height will not shade crops that need sun. Give each plant enough room. A crowded okra planting can become hard to harvest and hard to manage. If you are growing in a small raised bed, you may only want a few plants, not a full row. The secret with okra is harvesting young. Pods can become tough if they stay on the plant too long. Check the plants often, especially once they begin producing. A few tender pods harvested regularly are much better than large woody pods that sit too long. Okra is also a good reminder that late summer planting is regional. In a cool northern garden with frost approaching, okra may not be the best new planting. But in a hot garden with many warm weeks left, it can be exactly the kind of crop that keeps the bed alive. Peppers are another warm season crop that can make sense before summer ends, but the strategy changes late in the season. If you start peppers from seed at the end of summer in many parts of the United States, you probably will not get much before cold weather arrives. Peppers are slow compared with radishes, arugula, or bush beans. But if you already have pepper plants growing, or if you can find healthy transplants, peppers can still be valuable in a raised bed. They love warmth, they like good drainage, and raised beds can give their roots a strong environment. Place peppers where they get strong sun. Do not let cucumbers, okra, tomatoes, or squash shade them. Peppers need energy to flower and ripen fruit. If your season is getting short, you can harvest peppers green instead of waiting for full color. That is not a failure. It is adapting to the season. Peppers appreciate consistent moisture, but they do not want soggy soil. Raised beds help with drainage, but in hot weather, you still need to water deeply. A shallow sprinkle may keep the surface damp without supporting the roots. Compost helps, mulch helps, and steady care helps the plant keep setting fruit. If you are choosing between planting pepper seeds late or planting something faster, choose the faster crop unless your warm season is long. But if you have a good pepper transplant, a sunny gap, and enough heat left, peppers can add real color and flavor to the late summer bed. Eggplant follows a similar rule. Eggplant loves warm soil and warm air. It can grow beautifully in raised beds because the soil drains well and warms quickly. The glossy purple fruit can make a small food garden look rich and dramatic. But eggplant is not a last-minute crop for every climate. If your first frost is close, starting eggplant from seed late is usually not practical. A healthy transplant is the better option, and even then it depends on how much warm weather you have left. Eggplant likes fertile soil, steady moisture, and full sun. It does not want to be crowded by aggressive neighbors. If you plant it too close to squash or tomatoes, it may lose light and airflow. Give it a defined spot and watch the leaves. Healthy leaves are the engine of the harvest. One reason eggplant works well in raised beds is that you can focus care around a smaller space. You can add compost, mulch, water deeply, and keep weeds down. That matters because eggplant can slow down if it is stressed. Heat is usually not the problem. Dry roots, poor soil, pests, and crowding are more likely to hold it back. If your garden still has a long, warm window, eggplant can be a beautiful late summer choice. If your season is short, use that space for greens, roots, or fast beans instead. Again, the best crop is the one that matches your actual calendar. Cherry tomatoes are the crop many gardeners want to squeeze in because they are so rewarding. But late summer is where honesty matters. Starting cherry tomatoes from seed before summer ends is not the best plan for many gardens, especially where frost comes in fall. Tomatoes need time to grow, flower, set fruit, and ripen. But if you have a strong transplant, a volunteer plant already growing, or a cherry tomato that is still healthy in the bed, then it may be worth giving it support and care so it can finish strong. Cherry tomatoes are better than large slicing tomatoes for late season hope because smaller fruit often ripens faster. Still, do not overpromise to yourself. Look at your frost date, look at the plant size. Look at whether flowers or green fruit are already present. If the plant is tiny and your cold weather is close, choose another crop. In a raised bed, cherry tomatoes need support. A cage, stake, or trellis keeps the plant upright and helps protect airflow. Remove dead or diseased lower leaves. Mulch the soil. Water deeply and consistently. If the plant is still producing, harvest ripe fruit often. If frost is approaching and you have green tomatoes, you may need to pick them and let some ripen indoors, depending on your situation. Cherry tomatoes can be the jewel of a late summer raised bed, but they should not be treated like a fast filler. They are a finishing crop, a transplant crop, or an existing plant crop at this point in the season. Use them wisely and they can add color, sweetness, and a strong visual payoff. Now that the top of the bed has life, let's look at the crops that hide their harvest under the soil. Root crops are where a raised bed can surprise you. From above, they may look like a small patch of leaves. Underneath, they are building carrots, beets, radishes, or turnips. And raised beds can be excellent for root crops because the soil is often looser, deeper, and easier to improve than hard ground. Carrots are first. Carrots are not always the fastest crop, but they are one of the most satisfying crops to pull from a raised bed. The key is soil texture. Carrot roots need a path downward. If the bed is full of rocks, hard clumps, old roots, or compacted layers, carrots can fork, twist, or stay small. Before sowing carrots, loosen the area gently and remove anything that would block a straight root. Carrots are usually best direct sown. They do not like being transplanted because disturbing the young root can affect the shape. Sow them shallowly according to your seed packet, keep the surface evenly moist, and be patient. Carrot seeds can be slow to germinate compared with radish or arugula. In late summer, the challenge is keeping the top layer from drying out. A light cover, careful watering, or shade during the hottest part of the day can help, depending on your garden. Do not sow carrots where a large squash, tomato, or cucumber root system is already dominating the soil. Give them their own strip. A raised bed can hold many crops, but root crops do best when their underground space is respected. Carrots are a good choice if you want a harvest that carries into cooler weather. In many gardens, carrots become even more enjoyable as temperatures cool. Just choose a variety that fits your season and count your days carefully. Beets are next, and beets give you two kinds of harvest from one planting. Most people think of beet roots first, but beet greens are edible too. That makes beets especially useful in a late summer raised bed. Even if the roots are still developing, you may be able to harvest a few outer leaves carefully while the plant grows. Do not strip the plant bare, but remember that beets are not only about the bulb under the soil. Beets like loose, fertile soil with steady moisture. If the soil dries out too much, growth slows and texture can suffer. Raised beds can help because you can improve the soil in a focused space. Add compost, break up clumps, and keep the bed evenly watered while seeds germinate. Beets are usually direct sown. The seed clusters often produce more than one seedling, so thinning matters. This is where many beginners hesitate. It feels wrong to remove seedlings, but if every beet seedling stays crowded, the roots do not have room to size up. Thin carefully, and use the small greens if they are healthy and clean. In a raised bed layout, beets can fit in a block or a strip. They pair well with slower growing crops if you give them enough light. Just do not tuck them too deeply under big leaves where they cannot get sun. Radishes are one of the quickest confidence crops in the garden. If you want a raised bed to feel active again, radishes can help. They germinate quickly in good conditions, grow fast, and give you a visible result sooner than many other crops. For a late summer bed, radishes are especially useful because they can fill small spaces between bigger plantings or occupy a strip that will later be used for something else. But radishes still need the right conditions. In extreme heat, some radishes may become spicy, woody, or bolt faster. As the weather begins to cool, they often become easier and better quality. If your garden is still very hot, give them consistent moisture and consider waiting for a slightly cooler window. Radishes should be direct sown. They do not need transplanting and they do not need much fuss. What they do need is spacing. If radish seedlings are too crowded, they may make leaves without good roots. Thin them early, keep the soil moist, harvest when they are ready, not weeks later. A radish left too long in the ground can lose the crisp texture that makes it so satisfying. Radishes also make a great marker crop. Because they sprout quickly, they can help you see where a row is, while slower crops like carrots are still thinking about germinating. That little trick can make a mixed raised bed easier to manage. Turnips are another strong choice. As summer begins to lean toward fall, turnips give you flexibility. You can harvest the greens when they are young and tender, and you can also let the roots develop if your season allows. That makes them useful when you are not sure exactly how much time you have left. If the roots do not get huge, you may still get greens. If the weather cooperates, you may get both. Turnips usually prefer the cooler side of the season more than the hottest days of summer. In a hot garden, you may wait until the worst heat begins to soften. In a cooler region, late summer can be the right time to start them for fall. Direct sow them into loose soil, keep them moist, and thin them so the roots have room. In a raised bed, turnips can fit into a small block, especially where a crop has just come out. They do not need the same amount of space as zucchini or tomatoes, but they do need light. Do not hide them under a squash leaf and expect a good root. Root crops teach an important lesson about raised beds. The harvest you see above the soil is only part of the story. If the soil is loose, moist, and alive, the hidden harvest can be just as exciting as the fruit hanging on a vine. After the roots, we need crops that can carry the bed from hot days into cooler nights. Kale is one of the best bridge crops for this job. Kale can handle cool weather better than many summer crops, and in many gardens it becomes more enjoyable as the season moves toward fall. If you plant it before summer ends, think of it as a transition crop. It may start in warm soil, grow through changing weather, and become part of your fall harvest. You can start kale from seed if you have enough time, but transplants can help if the season is moving quickly. In hot weather, young kale may need a little protection while it gets established. Keep the soil moist, mulch around the plants, and avoid placing them where they will be baked against a hot wall or crowded by aggressive vines. One of the best things about kale is the harvest style. You do not have to cut the whole plant at once. You can harvest outer leaves and let the center keep growing. That makes kale valuable in a raised bed because one plant can feed you repeatedly over time. It is not just a one and done crop. Give kale enough room. Baby kale can be planted closer if you plan to harvest young, but full-size kale needs space for airflow and leaf growth. Decide your goal before you plant. Are you growing baby leaves or do you want larger plants for fall? That decision changes spacing. Swiss chard is one of the most beautiful and useful raised bed greens. It has thick, glossy leaves, colorful stems, and a strong presence in the bed. Swiss chard can tolerate heat better than many tender greens, which makes it helpful in the awkward time between summer and fall. It may not love extreme heat, but it often keeps going when lettuce gives up. Chard is also a cut-and-come-again crop. Harvest the outer leaves, leave the center, and the plant can continue producing. In a raised bed, that means a few plants can give you a steady supply of greens without needing to replant constantly. Give Swiss chard good soil and steady water. If it dries out too much, the leaves can become tough. If it is crowded, airflow drops and harvesting becomes harder. Place it where you can reach the outer leaves easily. Chard is too useful to hide behind a tomato cage where you forget to harvest it. Swiss chard is also excellent for visual appeal. If you want your raised bed to look productive and colorful, chard helps. The stems can be red, yellow, pink, orange, or white depending on the variety. It turns a practical food bed into something beautiful without sacrificing usefulness. Collards are another strong green, especially for gardeners in warmer regions. Collards are sturdy, they make large leaves, handle heat better than many delicate greens, and can carry a raised bed toward fall with a strong, reliable presence. But collards need space. This is not a tiny filler plant. A full collard plant can become broad, so treat it with respect in your layout. If you are planting collards late in summer, transplants can be helpful, especially if your season is not long. In warmer zones, you may have more flexibility. Either way, give them fertile soil, consistent moisture, and room for air to move around the leaves. Like kale and chard, collards can be harvested by taking outer leaves while the plant continues to grow. That makes them valuable for a long harvest window. You do not need to wait for one big final harvest. You can take a few leaves when they are ready and let the plant keep working. In a raised bed, collards can serve as a background or anchor plant. Put them where their size makes sense. Do not place them at the front edge if they will block everything behind them. Think of them as part of the architecture of the bed. Arugula brings a different kind of value. Arugula is fast, flavorful, and excellent for filling small spaces. It gives you peppery leaves that can turn a simple salad, sandwich, or bowl of soup into something fresh from the garden. But arugula is sensitive to heat. In very hot weather, it can bolt quickly and become stronger in flavor. That does not mean you should never plant it before summer ends. It means you should plant it intelligently. If your garden is still blazing hot, wait for a slightly cooler stretch. Plant it where it gets some afternoon protection or sow small amounts at a time. A big planting of arugula in heat can bolt before you use it. A small succession sowing gives you better control. You can plant a short strip, harvest baby leaves, and sow again later. Arugula is usually direct sown. It does not need much space if you are growing baby greens. Keep the surface moist until it germinates, and harvest early for tender leaves. If it starts to bolt, you can still use some leaves, but the flavor may become sharper. This is one of those crops that makes a raised bed feel generous because it grows quickly. You may not get a huge basket from one small strip, but you get freshness. And at the end of summer, freshness matters. Lettuce is the crop everyone wants, but it needs honesty in late summer. Lettuce does not love intense heat. If the bed is hot, the soil is dry, and the sun is harsh, lettuce may struggle, bolt, or taste bitter. But as the season begins to shift, lettuce becomes useful again. The trick is timing and placement. If you want lettuce before summer ends, choose heat-tolerant types when possible, sow small amounts, and consider giving it afternoon shade. The edge of a raised bed near taller crops can sometimes be useful if the shade is light, not complete. Lettuce needs light, but it also appreciates relief from harsh heat. Keep lettuce evenly moist. Dry soil is one of the fastest ways to stress it. In a raised bed, that means checking moisture often, especially after hot, windy days. A thin mulch around established lettuce can help, but be careful with tiny seedlings. Lettuce can be grown for baby leaves, which is often smarter late in the season than waiting for perfect full heads. Baby leaf lettuce gives you a faster harvest and reduces the risk of losing the crop to heat or timing. Cut gently, allow regrowth if the variety and conditions allow, and sow again in small batches. Lettuce reminds us that late summer gardening is not about forcing cool season crops into brutal heat. It is about watching the shift. When the nights begin to cool, the raised bed opens a new door. Now we are down to the small crops, the ones people underestimate until they need flavor, quick harvest, and empty spaces filled. Green onions are one of the easiest ways to use the edges of a raised bed. They do not demand the same space as squash, peppers, or collards. They can fit along borders, between slower crops, or in small gaps where a larger plant would be too much. Green onions are useful because you can harvest a few at a time. You do not need a dramatic harvest day. You can walk outside, cut what you need, and leave the rest growing. In late summer, green onions can help make a raised bed feel productive even when larger crops are still developing. While carrots are germinating, while kale is sizing up, while peppers are ripening, green onions can quietly add value. They are the kind of crop that does not shout, but you miss them when you do not have them. Give them decent soil, steady moisture, and enough light. Do not bury them under a squash canopy. If you plant them along the edge, make sure they are not constantly drying out. Edges of raised beds can dry faster than the center, especially in hot weather. Green onions are also a good crop for succession planting. Sow or plant a small amount, then add more later. That way, you do not harvest everything at once and end up with another empty space. Basil is a warm season herb that belongs in this conversation because it can turn a raised bed into a kitchen garden. If your weather is still warm, basil can grow quickly and give you repeated harvests. It pairs naturally with tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and summer cooking. A few basil plants in a raised bed can make the whole space feel more useful because you can harvest flavor even when you are not picking a full basket of vegetables. Basil likes warmth, sun, and regular cutting. If you let it flower too early, leaf production may slow, so pinch the tips and harvest often. That simple habit encourages branching and gives you more usable leaves. Do not strip the plant completely. Take enough to use, leave enough for the plant to keep growing. In a raised bed, basil works well near other warm season crops, but do not let it be swallowed by them. It needs light. If a tomato or cucumber shades it too much, it will stretch and weaken. Give it a spot where you can reach it easily, because basil is most useful when you actually harvest it. Basil will not handle frost, so treat it as a crop for the warm weeks you still have. Use it while the season gives it to you. Cut it fresh, cook with it, preserve some if you want, and enjoy the fact that a small plant can change the flavor of many meals. Cilantro is the opposite kind of herb. It loves the cooler side of the season and can be frustrating in heat. Many gardeners plant cilantro once, watch it bolt, and decide they are bad at growing it. Usually the problem is timing. Cilantro does not enjoy hot, stressful conditions. In late summer, the best strategy is small sowings, cooler placement, and patience for the weather shift. If your garden is still very hot, do not plant one huge patch and expect it to behave like spring cilantro. Sow a small strip, give it consistent moisture, and consider light afternoon shade. As temperatures cool, cilantro becomes easier. This is why it fits into the end of summer raised bed plan. It may not be the first crop you plant in blazing heat, but it can be one of the crops that carries flavor into fall. Cilantro is usually direct sown. It has a taproot and does not love being transplanted. Keep the soil moist while it germinates, and harvest leaves before it bolts if you want the classic cilantro flavor. If it does bolt, the flowers can still attract beneficial insects, and the seeds are coriander, so the plant is not useless. But for leaf harvest, timing matters. Cilantro is a reminder that a raised bed does not have to be filled only with big plants. A few small herbs in the right season can make the bed more valuable every week. Now that all 20 crops are on the table, the real question is how to combine them without crowding the bed. Start by choosing your main crop. In a small raised bed, you may choose one large crop, maybe zucchini, yellow squash, okra, cherry tomato, cucumber, pepper, or eggplant. not all of them at once. One or two large crops can anchor the bed. Around them, you choose smaller crops that fit the space and season. If you plant cucumbers, use vertical support. Let the vine climb instead of crawl. Under or near that vertical space, you may still have room for green onions, lettuce in light shade, or a small strip of radishes, depending on sunlight. If you plant zucchini or yellow squash, give it room and keep smaller crops farther from the leaf canopy. If you plant peppers or eggplant, keep them in strong sun and use lower crops around the edges where they will not compete too heavily. Think in layers. Tall crops and trellised crops go where they will not shade everything else. Medium crops like kale, chard, collards, peppers, and eggplant need their own room. Low crops like lettuce, arugula, radishes, and green onions can use edges and openings. Root crops need a loose strip of soil without heavy competition. Herbs can tuck into gaps, but only if they still get light. This is where many raised beds fail. The gardener plants everything close because the young seedlings look small. For the first 2 weeks, the bed looks perfect. Then the squash expands, the cucumber reaches, the tomatoes lean, the greens stretch, and suddenly every plant is touching every other plant. Water cannot reach the soil evenly. Air cannot move. Harvesting becomes frustrating, and the bed that was supposed to produce more food becomes a tangled wall of stress. So plant for the size the crop will become, not the size it is today. Succession planting can also help. You do not have to plant the whole bed on one day. Sow radishes in a small strip now, then another strip later. Plant arugula in small batches. Add lettuce when the heat begins to soften. Tuck in green onions where space opens. Replace a finished bush bean planting with greens. Replace harvested radishes with cilantro. A raised bed is not a one-time event. It is a moving system. Keep watering deeply. Late summer crops often fail because the gardener waters the surface, but not the root zone. Push your finger into the soil. Check under the mulch. Learn how fast your bed dries. A raised bed in full sun, full of active plants, can use water quickly. Deep watering encourages stronger roots. Shallow watering keeps plants dependent on the surface, where heat is most intense. Keep feeding gently. Compost before planting is the foundation. Heavy feeding crops like squash, cucumbers, peppers, eggplant, and tomatoes may need more support than radishes or arugula. But do not throw strong fertilizer at stressed plants in extreme heat and expect magic. Watch the plant. Pale leaves, slow growth, and poor fruiting can mean many things, including water stress, heat stress, root problems, or nutrient needs. Respond carefully, harvest often. This is one of the simplest ways to keep a raised bed productive. Pick beans before they get tough. Pick cucumbers before they become oversized. Cut basil before it flowers heavily. Take outer leaves from kale, chard, and collards. Pull radishes when they are ready. Use baby lettuce instead of waiting too long. The more you harvest at the right time, the more useful the bed becomes. And remember the real goal. You are not trying to create the most crowded raised bed on the block. You are trying to create a living food bed that keeps giving. A bed with a few strong crops is better than a bed with 20 struggling ones. A handful of fresh beans, a bunch of basil, a few radishes, some green onions, a cucumber from the trellis, and a bowl of greens can be more valuable than a garden that looked ambitious but never settled into balance. By the end of the season, the raised bed that looked empty can become something completely different. The back may have cucumbers climbing. One corner may hold peppers or eggplant. A strip of soil may hide carrots or beets. The edges may be lined with green onions, lettuce, or arugula. A few kale or chard plants may be waiting for cooler nights. Basil may be ready for one more cutting. Cilantro may be ready as fall gets closer. And where bare soil once looked like the end of the season, you now have food growing in layers. That is the real promise of raised bed gardening. Not that every crop works every time. Not that one small bed can ignore the weather. Not that you can plant anything, anywhere, whenever you want. The promise is that a small space, managed well, can stay useful longer than you think. So before you walk past that empty raised bed and decide the season is over, pause, refresh the soil, check your frost date, Choose the crops that still have time. Give big plants room, give roots loose soil, give greens some relief from heat, give herbs a place where you will actually harvest them, and give the whole bed deep water and mulch. The season may be slowing down, but your raised bed does not have to sit empty. With the right crops, fresh compost, steady moisture, smart spacing, and a little succession planting, one small bed can still become a late summer food garden. And sometimes that is the best kind of harvest, not the one that came from a perfect plan in spring, but the one that came because you looked at an empty space near the end of summer and decided it still had something left to give.